guys, welcome back to Jessie's bookshelf. As you can tell by the title of today's video, I'm going to be talking about some of the books that I read in October that I didn't really like. The good thing about this group is that I think I only DNF'd one of them, and that one is probably going to be the most controversial, and you'll see why in a second. Okay, so here is my little stack of books I didn't like. Actually, I lied. I DNF'd two of them. Okay, let's jump right into this. So the very first book was Cackle by Rachel Harrison. I love this cover. It looks so spooky, which made me so excited to read this around spooky season. So this story follows Annie Crane, who is an English teacher who recently separated from her long-term boyfriend, and now she's absolutely devastated and heartbroken. So she decided that she wanted to get a fresh start and moves to this small town called Rowan. She falls in love with this small, beautiful town, but then she meets this strange woman named Sophie, and it seems like she wields some sort of power. I gave this book a 1 out of 5. I DNF'd it about halfway through. I just found it to be so boring, and I'm sorry that I don't have much else to say. I just wasn't intrigued, wasn't into it. I gave it a good chance. Like I said, I made it halfway through, but I just felt like nothing of substance occurred. There was no major plot line, no conflict, nothing spooky or witchy. It was just so boring to me. So I'm sorry if you enjoyed this. You're allowed to. It just wasn't my cup of tea, if you get what I mean. Okay, look how small this next book is. This is a novella. It's called We Need to Do Something by Max Booth III. It's about this Texas family who take refuge from this sudden and violent tornado. They have to try and take shelter where they can because unfortunately they don't have a basement, so they all huddle into the parents' ensuite, and they think they'll just be hiding in there for a couple hours, but the tornado goes on for days and days, or so they think, and so they're all trapped in this cramped space together. They lose track of time, they have these heated conversations, and they realize that the weather is the last thing they need to worry about. So I give this book a 1 out of 5. I did not like it at all. The first half of the book might have been a little bit intriguing, but the second half was just this confusing mess. This book ended up being more of a psychological horror, which isn't always bad, but in this case, it just didn't work for me. And I can't even begin to discuss the ending without getting upset because nothing happened in the end. This book just dragged on the entire way and then delivered nothing to you in the end. So it just felt really pointless to me. And what I find the most bizarre is that 60% of this book is just butt and fart jokes. I'm not even over exaggerating. If you've read this book, you know what I mean. It was like page after page of these disgusting fart or butt jokes, and I was like, what am I reading right now? I was just really hoping for this gripping thriller when I picked up this book, but unfortunately I was super disappointed. Then we have Hidden Pictures by Jason Rekulak. This follows a woman named Mallory who was recently out of rehab for a drug addiction, and she takes this job as a nanny in this really prestigious, rich neighborhood. She's babysitting this 5-year-old boy named Teddy, and she just loves her new job. She's very bonded to this boy. But what's strange is that Teddy is basically never seen without his sketchbook, and at first he draws really cute things like bunnies and trees and balloons, but one day he draws something very sinister that takes her by surprise. He draws a man in a forest dragging this woman's lifeless body. I think this book is cool because it's filled with these illustrations, as you can see, but I only gave this book a 2 out of 5. Listen, the first 80% of the book had so much potential. I probably would have given it a 3.5 if it stayed that way, but towards the end, it just went off the rails. If you've read this book, you know what I mean. It was just too unbelievable. And listen, I know that you have to suspend your disbelief when you're reading thrillers and horrors and stuff like that, but this was just too much. The twists had no logical reasoning. It's like the author wasn't planning out what he was writing. It was like he was just writing on the spot, and when he got to the end, he was like, what can I throw in there that will shock people? It just felt like I was reading an entirely different book by the end of it, and I did not like it. Very disappointed. Okay, so here's a controversial one that I DNF'd. It Starts With Us by Colleen Hoover. So this book picks up almost a year after the first one ended, and it also includes Atlas's side of the story, and though Ryle still is in the picture, Lily is able to keep herself mostly away from his rage, and Colleen basically wanted to give Atlas and Lily the ending and story that they deserved, which I do agree with. I love their characters, I love their love story, but in the end, after reading about halfway through this, I realized realized that this book was completely unneeded. I gave this book a 1 out of 5. It was just so boring. I can't even describe to you how dull and just, I couldn't get through it. I couldn't do that to myself. Now, to me personally, and I can't just assume that this was the reason, but it kind of felt like a cash grab in a little way, because I felt like the previous book ended perfectly. The story was told perfectly. I gave that book a 4 out of 5. I really liked that. But it felt like she just made this book because that book went so popular, so viral, that she wanted to like grab it and pull it and like make something out of it that she could also like ride the wave with. I don't know. I was just really content with the way that It Ends With Us ended. No pun intended. Because I was kind of able to imagine Lily and Atlas's story with my imagination of what occurred after that. And this book just ruined that for me. I'm sorry to say. If you enjoyed it, that's okay. Let me know down below what you thought if you've read this. Okay, and then lastly we have Near the Bone by Christina Henry. This follows a woman named Maddie who lives in a small cabin in the middle of the woods with her husband. Her whole existence revolves around doing chores, following orders, trying to make her husband happy. As you can assume, her husband is very abusive. He's short-tempered. He's literally a nightmare to live with. But then when Maddie finds this mutilated body of a fox in the forest, things change really quickly and she notices that a creature has been watching them in the depths of the forest. A creature who is obviously killing these animals. I gave this book a 1 out of 5. I was really excited to read this book because it's about a bear-like cryptid who is living in this forest with this couple. And it's cool because you don't really see a lot of books that involve cryptozoology. So like I said, within the first chapter of the book, you realize that this woman's husband is incredibly abusive. And I just felt like that storyline took over everything else. The creature has a very, very small role in the grand scheme of things. And sometimes I wondered what the point of even having this cryptid in the book even was. It almost seemed like this author was trying to fit too many storylines into one book and they just did not mesh. I feel like it almost should have been either one, a story about this woman being abused who's trying to escape from her husband in this isolated forest, or two, about this couple being terrorized by this cryptid. Having it be both was just so hard to concentrate on both things, especially because the husband was so utterly awful and disturbing that I was more scared of him than I was this creature. I was almost relieved when I got to the pages about the creature because I wasn't afraid of him anymore. Speaking of the husband, definitely check your trigger warnings before going into this book because it literally describes this abuse in such detail. It's utterly horrific and I felt sick reading some parts of this. Like it almost felt wrong to me reading this book. Okay, I'm gonna get into some minor spoilers, so if you want to continue, do so, but I don't recommend reading this book anyway, so I don't think it really matters. Okay, I was also confused because the first half of this book felt like a totally different plot than the second half. For example, the first half was about this woman being abused, about this couple being stalked by this creature, and then in the second half, she comes across this group of young adults who claim to be cryptozoologists who are looking for this bear-like cryptid. They notice that she's being abused, they want to help her escape, and it's at this point that this book starts being filled with this unnecessary humor. It's like the author was trying to throw in some comic relief that just did not land for me. How do you throw in comic relief when you're mixing it with this woman being brutally tortured? It was like every few sentences this character would crack this unnecessary joke that just seemed inappropriate in most situations. For example, there was this one scene where they're all hiding in the cabin and this woman's abusive husband is trying to break into the cabin while this cryptid is like circling it, watching them. So there's all these threats trying to get into the cabin while they're all hiding, and then one of the characters is like, hey, do you mind if I make a grilled cheese? Okay. And then he literally starts making the grilled cheese and complains that he doesn't have bacon or tomato to put in it. Meanwhile, people are dying, lying on the floor wounded, and this guy is literally making them all grilled cheese. Like, was that supposed to be funny? Or like, I'm so confused. And don't even get me started on how this book ends. You know, you're hoping as you're reading it that by the end you're gonna find out why this cryptid is there, what this cryptid fully looks like. You know, more information about this creature because because this author keeps it very secretive throughout the whole book. By the end of it, you know nothing. So what was the point of the whole book? I don't know, the book just seemed pointless and utterly disturbing in the worst way possible. I don't like this book. Anyways, so guys, those are all of the books that I read in October that I didn't really love. Comment down below a book that you read recently that you hoped would be good but kind of disappointed you. Anyways though, I hope you have an awesome rest of your day and I will see you in my next video. Bye!